Well, I've seen a lot of moms stress out about homeschooling, either beforehand, the concept of it, or in the moment, feeling like they're doing something wrong, or everything is too much to handle. But I just wouldn't want anybody to feel that way, because you're doing what's best for your child if you are investing in them. And so it's going to be enough. Whatever you're doing is going to be enough if you're putting your best out there for them.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program.
Hey everybody, welcome to Homeschool Talks. I'm your host for today, Daniel Heffington, obviously not Jim Mason, your normal host, but I get to fill in for him today, and I'm pleased to do it. And I want to introduce you to Casey. She's our guest today, and first of all, thanks for joining us, Casey.
Sure, happy to be here.
And we asked Casey on today to share her story about how she's homeschooling her gifted student and how HSLDA Compassion was able to assist her in continuing to make homeschooling possibility for her family. So Casey, for somebody who's not familiar with your story, could you just kind of dive right in and give us just, the starting point? You have a gifted student. When did you discover that? What was that story like?
Well, honestly, he was very, very young. Before he was one, I knew there was something different going on. So he would want to sit and read book after book, and as I was a teacher before, and so naturally, I might point to some of the words, but he quickly grasped onto the concept that you follow from left to right and go down the page and then you turn. So it was amazing how quickly he did that. And he loved numbers. He had a number puzzle. So he had the chunky numbers he put in place.
Yeah.
Loved the number 20. He laughed so hard. It tickled him. I never knew another child that loved the number 20 or any number like that. And it was before he had turned one. So by the time he was one, he still wasn't speaking, but he was forming words by putting letters together. And his love of books just continued. So over the next year or so, I realized I'm going to need to do something different for education. I was a public school teacher, and I had planned on going back to teaching in the classroom, and whatever kids I had would go to school. And it was it'd be a whole event every day. But I realized that wasn't going to work. So I started looking for different options. And every avenue I found would tell me either he could end up sitting on a computer all day, or I could work to skip him grades. So while academically, I knew he was going to be beyond his years, I also know that doesn't mean that a child is beyond his years in every capacity. So I knew emotionally he wasn't going to be prepared for that. And I didn't want him to grow up too fast. It happens too fast as it is.
Yeah. He has a different childhood. You don't want to skip childhood.
Exactly. Yes. So then I started looking into homeschooling. It was a new thing to me. I grew up in Maryland. I didn't know anybody that homeschooled, but I had moved to South Carolina, and it's a thing. And now across the country, it's much more common. But it made me feel more comfortable that I was in an area where I wouldn't be isolated or ostracized because I was homeschooling. And so we would seek out all the different social opportunities, and we were involved with a co-op for a while, 3 years. And that was a really great experience for him socially and to learn some of those normal classroom things. But then all the academics we were able to do at home on his own level. As a teacher, it was a little sad that he breezed through everything so quickly, all the fun elementary activities. It's oh, yay, match your colors. We didn't get to do those things. but it's a different path. And so it's been a learning journey for me as much as it has been for him.
Can I ask, did you notice, was he relatively the same advanced in all the different subjects, or did he gravitate towards a couple over others? How did that work?
He's actually very evenly spread, which is kind of unique. I did end up getting him tested when he was in second grade, so that we could apply for the Davidson Young Scholars Program. And the therapist that tested him, the psychologist that tested him, said that she had never seen another child so evenly dispersed among all the different subjects. So it's been interesting that I have to be challenged in all the areas, but it's been fun.
That's amazing. So you identified that he was gifted, that you were skipping some of those more, or fast forwarding through some of those more basic steps of learning. What resources could you use then? Because, were you just literally using the next grade or several grade resources that you would use for a different, like a high school student, or how did that work?
Yeah. So he's technically a sixth grader this year. Through fifth grade, I basically put together all of our own curriculum, pulling from everything I could find online or books from the library or curriculum type books. I would pull different parts of it. And I'm certified through eighth grade. So I was able to kind of pull on all of that, pull out some of the things that I hadn't used in years. So that was really helpful. And then just we tried to get involved with all of the homeschool programs in the area, or different avenues for him to interact with other kids, because he's gifted and he's also an only child. So it makes it a little more challenging.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to get him out there to learn some of those things.
Yeah. The social connection type things, because I imagine if he has a brain that's just so gifted academically, it's like, that's actually a question I have. Do you ever have to tell him, like, okay, now is not study time, now we're going to go have fun or something like that? Or does he kind of self-regulate with that?
He naturally does it pretty well now. Sometimes he will spend as much time as possible on a book. So sometimes I'll have to say, no, set the book down and we'll come back to it. But I've always made a point to get him exposed to as much as possible. So going out, like spending time with art, spending time with music, spending lots of time outside and hiking and things like that, different sports. So he does enjoy all of those things. But sometimes I do have to remind him, we can read some more later.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So
that's awesome. Now, are there also, on the flip side, just because a student's gifted at something, does that mean they inherently love school? Or is it like other students where some days we're not loving school and some days we are?
Yeah. So we have many battles about school.
Okay.
One thing, gifted children think they know everything, and so they don't need to learn.
As my mom would testify, even non-gifted children sometimes think they know everything.
Yeah. So that's a thing. Like, no, you really do have to learn it. And then the actual work is the hardest thing. And that's common for boys anyway, but to want to actually do the writing or show the steps to solve that algebra problem, all of that, he wants to just do in his head, and then that's good, right?
That's a beautiful ability that some of us can't do.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Or he wants to learn everything just by reading a book. So not do all the work that's involved with it, especially when it comes to things like writing papers and stuff like that.
That makes a lot of sense, because I feel like that when you have that type of a gifting in your brain power, it could almost feel redundant, where you're like, listen, trust me, I got it, but I know we have to do the work too. I get that.
That's right. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so you said did I catch you right that he's in sixth grade now? And
technically, he's a sixth
technically
grader.
In sixth grade, but what's the work level he's doing most of the time?
10th.
10th. Okay, wow, that's amazing. So So as you said that you were fairly familiar, you were certified up through 8th grade, and you were kind of pulling on resources that you had maybe had in your stockpile at one time or another. What happened after that? Because now we're 2 grades past that.
Yes. Well, so this past year was the big year. Like when he was in 5th grade, I was almost scrambling. What am I going to do? Knowing it was going to be a big deal, big change, because he was ready to start. He wanted to get high school credit for what he was doing.
Good. That's good motivation.
So we're counting all those classes, but we're still technically calling him a 6th grader so that he's not growing up too fast, and we can see where he goes in the next 6 years, because that's a long time. So I started looking at like curriculum options or school options. There were not good school options. It was still difficult to find opportunities for a would-be 6th grader to perform at that higher level. So started figuring out what curriculum we could do at home. So we had spent a lot of time at the different homeschool conventions and things like that, where you can see all the different possibilities out there. And so last spring, we spent a lot of time in that convention hall, browsing through everything. One of the biggest things was, it's going to cost so much.
Sure. Yeah.
And we were going through a very difficult financial time. And so it was an even harder hit. Whereas like, you send them to public school, it's free, and then you don't have to worry about it. So I started trying to figure out how to afford to keep him at home and get all the supplies and materials that he needed, so we could continue that and he could continue on the path, because he does have like a projected path that he wants to keep on. So I was just browsing through. I knew of HSLDA and that they were there to support homeschoolers. Upon digging, I found that they had financial support available. And so I said, well, I'm going to check it out and see if it's possible at all that they could help. So I got my application together, and I was beyond thrilled when it came back.
That's incredible.
And yes, it was so exciting. And so things like all the lab materials for science classes, that was one of the big things. To know that all of those things were covered was just like such a relief. And we've been able to do everything this school year with the materials and books and all that we needed. And he's been doing a great job with it.
That's incredible. Yeah. So it sounds like then you would have reached out to HSLDA Compassion, which is our charitable arm. And so for anybody listening who's watching this, maybe you find yourself like in a similar spot as Casey. Some people think of HSLDA, they just think the legal defense that HSLDA has been known for a long time. It's amazing, flagship thing we do. But we have these grants, so and they're available to a lot of people. So was that and you can answer honestly, because we haven't pre-gamed this, but was that a hectic process? Was that a straightforward process? What did that feel like going like to get ready for that? Because sometimes, like, if you're just out there in the world, you think apply for a grant, you're like, that sounds intense.
Right. Well, as a teacher, I had applied for grants because I taught in Title I schools, and so I would apply for grants so that I could take my kids on field trips or have the materials in the classroom. So it was not an unfamiliar idea to me. So I could definitely see it being a daunting task for somebody, but it was completely straightforward. It was so clear of what was expected, what was needed to review the application. It's not like, what's your name and what do you need? They want real information, like, to know how they're really supporting the people they're supporting. It's very obvious on their application how much they care about the homeschooling families. And so they want to make sure the resources are going where they're going to actually be used. And so I appreciated that. I appreciated the I guess, intensity of the application, in that there was enough information required to actually apply. Yeah.
Cool. Well, there you go. I mean, if you're listening to this, like, consider that. I know that's not my job. I have a different job with HSLDA, but I know some of the people who work on that, and they're sincere. This is what they love to do. So, with the supplies for all of you said like the lab supplies and all this, what kind of like if you care to share, what kind of projects is he working on with that? Like what does that look like? Anything particularly gross or notable or awesome? Are we exploding things or taking things apart? Like what's the
Well,
deal?
yeah. So for science this year, we did biology and astronomy. So biology was the big expensive one,
Yeah,
with all of that. And so the dissections were by far his favorite part. So that was towards the end of the whole class, and so he thoroughly enjoyed that. So he thought he was amazing. He wants to be some sort of scientist. He says immunologist. We'll see.
that's
Um,
amazing.
but it's still in
Relevant.
that it's in that field, yes. And so he definitely thought he was pretty cool, pulling out all his official lab materials and tearing apart those critters.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he loved it.
What was the weirdest critter that he dissected? I don't know what they have kids do these days. For
Well,
me, like in high school, it was like frogs and stuff. Like,
yes. So there was a frog. The thing that threw me was the fish. I thought it would be just a little fish. The thing was like this big.
oh my word.
When we pulled it out of the box, I was like, what? I didn't even realize that kind of fish got that big. I don't recall what kind it was now,
That's
but
insane.
it was big. And that was the one that was probably the most surprising to him, because it was explained how to dissect, and they wanted you to like scrape to dig a hole into the skull of it. And so he got to use the different material, the different tools that came with the kit to get in there to see everything. So he thought it was awesome. And so for each part, he would hold up and he'd say, "Can I interest you in a fish brain or whatever?" "No, thank you. I'll pass." And so then he'd pull out the next part.
That's amazing. He
Yeah,
sounds
he loved
fun.
it. Oh yeah, lots of fun.
How would you say, you spent you had a whole life in the public education system. You saw students, I'm assuming, grow and develop and all of that throughout that work. How would you say homeschooling has allowed your son to grow and develop, either differently or similarly, or whatever you would speak to that?
Yeah, so as a teacher, it was really difficult to meet the actual needs of all those kids in the class. Minimum 25 kids in the class. And they all are somewhere different. They all need it explained to them differently, or, different kind of environment. So homeschooling has been amazing, because sometimes we'll move around the house, like we'll work in one room for a while, then we need a change of scenery, so we can move to the next room so he can be engaged in that. We're also able to take our learning outside sometimes, so that we're enjoying the world around us and hearing the birds as we're learning. And so that's been a lot of fun. I think it's given him an appreciation for the world around him more than he would have had if he was just in a classroom. And just being able to have real conversations about all the topics that have come up has been awesome. In a classroom, you don't get to do that. It's unfortunate, because every child has so many amazing things to share, or so many amazing questions they want to ask, and there's just not time for it. So that's been really awesome. And being able to direct what he's learning each year, it's been fun. And it's been really cool to see him direct kind of where we're going, because I'll give him some choices, like, here we are, let's choose this or this topic. And so some of the things that he's chosen have just been really exciting. And he's, learned some of his passions and different things that he wouldn't get to learn if he was in a classroom.
It's amazing. And you're obtaining fantastic buy-in that way too, because it's like, you're choosing this together. You're not just saying this is what this is what you guys sit down and do. I mean, maybe there's some of that, but he's getting to do something he's theoretically interested in. So that's amazing. So I have this like I said, I don't think if you talk to my mom, I was homeschooled growing up. I don't think if you talk to my mom, she would relate necessarily to the extreme giftedness of her student. But one part of your story reminds me of growing up, because both of my parents were public school teachers, and they had both gone to school for it. They had established careers doing it, and they decided for different reasons that eventually it was homeschooling was what they wanted to do for me. My mom, as a public school teacher, was quickly very interested in homeschooling. She thought it was like pretty neat and awesome. My dad was a public school teacher, and he can't really explain why, but he had a pretty strong resistance to homeschooling. Would you say? And then he came around after he kind of got sold on it. He saw it in action. He was like, okay, yes, this is actually kind of awesome. And now he's a big fan. Did you have a stance one way or the other before you chose homeschooling for yourself? You said you didn't grow up knowing people who were homeschooled, but did you either find resistance to come over, or were you like, oh, this is great, I've just never done it? Did you have a stance, or did you just develop that?
Well, I think, and I mean, it wasn't my first choice. Like, I went to check out all the other options first. And then, but when I came to the idea of homeschooling, I jumped on board pretty quickly. And some of that may have been because we were new to the area. And so we had to go out and get involved to get to know people in the area. And so it was easy to kind of connect that it was going to be the same kind of thing, like taking on a new adventure one day at a time, making your plans for what you're going to do. We were really involved with the Moms Club in the area. And I ended up being the president for a few years, until he was 5 when we started kindergarten. And so those few years really let me see, well, there's a lot in our area so that we can go out and learn hands-on. So we might learn about everything in a book, and we're going to read about those different jobs or the history of our state. But we can also go out into the state and see those places firsthand. And I've always loved hands-on learning anyway. And so to realize like, I get to do that for my son every day. Yes.
That's incredible.
Let's do it.
Yeah. That's a great moment. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let me see. I have a couple other questions for you if you still have time before we wrap up. It's kind of a similar vein, but two different questions. First one is, what encouragement would you offer to homeschool families that find themselves in similar financial situations where maybe they need a grant, or maybe they don't know what they need, but they're feeling the pressure. Secondly, kind of related, what would you say to families who are just getting on the track of, okay, we probably have a student who's gifted beyond the normal pace, and how do they navigate that? So kind of the two things. One, the financial side. Two, say you have a student maybe like yours. What advice would you give?
Well, so finances are tough. They impact everything you do. You do have to be able to provide for what you're trying to do. So it is tough, but thankfully there are a lot of resources out there that don't cost a lot. It might require more time because you're going to have to put it together or compile all the different parts rather than a ready-made curriculum for you. But it's also going to allow you to meet the needs of your child more effectively because you're going to piece together the things that your child really needs. So it's a big investment of time, but I think there's a payoff beyond just the financial ability at that point then. So then just being able to find used materials or homeschool groups in the area. People want to pass around materials to one another. And so that's a really great option as well. And then, of course, I would definitely check out, Compassion grants or other options that are with larger organizations that might, have that ability to help financially. For somebody that is just realizing that their child might be profoundly gifted, it can be a lonely place. You can feel isolated and like nobody understands you or your child. And it makes it a little bit of an awkward setting sometimes when you go and your child is a little bit different than the others. So definitely finding some support, finding some other people that can relate or understand is really valuable. I found that we were part of a co-op that was about 45 minutes from home, and he did that for 3 years. It gave us some sense of community. It wasn't academically focused, so it worked. Once they became more academic because they hit 3rd grade, we transitioned out of it and we started driving an hour and a half for a co-op. Because of our area, that's what the options were. But it was to a group of gifted kids. A couple of the kids they are still in the Davidson Young Scholars Program, which he's in. And so they have a different kind of connection than they would with other kids. And so that co-op was amazing, because we would spend half the day doing some project-based learning together. So all the ages could kind of do their thing together, each, working, doing their own parts. And then we went to the park for the second half of the day for them to play. And so it was great. And the moms had the time to then talk and, work through some of the struggles that they were dealing with. Because yes, you have the same struggles that you have for any child, but you also have some different ones. So it's nice to have that support. I also found that I had to go distances for the support. But there's a group that's about 3.5 hours away from us. And we've done some things with them virtually. And then also we've gone there for some activities or met somewhere in the middle. And so the kids are able to connect with each other online. They have their own like Minecraft server so they can play together and talk about what they're doing. The moms are able to, or dads too, the parents are able to support one another with questions or needing to find whatever kind of support they're needing. So that's been really cool. And then you have other parents invested in the same kind of thing that you're invested in. And so like, the whole project-based learning idea for gifted learners is a lot of fun because they can kind of come up with the ideas on their own and take it on the run and do it as much as they want to. And so like one of the coolest projects that he got to do with that group was they launched a balloon into near space. So however far, yeah. So they did all the preparation. They got it all ready to go. We all met in one location. They launched the thing up. They had the tracking to be able to follow it and the radio signals and everything. And then we were balloon chasers and we had to go follow where it was. And, they had a prediction of where it was going to go approximately based on the winds and everything. And so eventually it came down, ended up being in the woods on a shooting range.
Oh, wow. Nice. Okay.
In the middle
Wear
of nowhere.
your orange vest, kids. We don't.
Yeah. So we had to contact the facility. Like once we realized it landed on their property, we contacted them and then they let us on their property, but it was way up in the trees. And so we had to bring in somebody else that had a bow and arrow, and he made a contraption so that
No way.
he would shoot it up. So it wasn't the arrow that he had up there, but he would shoot from the bow with a long rope and get it up into the tree. And then they got it down. And it was so exciting.
That's basically my childhood dream, was shooting ropes from bows and arrows. So, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah. So things like that, getting involved with kids that have similar interests is really, really, it's truly invaluable because those kinds of experiences are the ones that he just loves and are going to be so memorable to him. And they're so impactful.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a great answer. Thank you. Let's see. Is there anything else that comes to mind as we're getting close to wrapping up that either you've learned or you've thought about as a mom doing this journey that you'd say to maybe either students or parents out there? Anything else you want to add?
Well, I've seen a lot of moms stress out about homeschooling, either beforehand, the concept of it, or in the moment, feeling like they're doing something wrong or everything is too much to handle. But I just wouldn't want anybody to feel that way, because you're doing what's best for your child if you are investing in them. And so it's going to be enough. Whatever you're doing is going to be enough if you're putting your best out there for them. And remind those kids that they get to be homeschooled. It's been a really good thing to sometimes give the option on those difficult days. Well, would you rather go to school, or do you want to be, or you can kind of get it together and we can continue homeschooling? Definitely the homeschooling option, because he does really love it when he sits back, like even in those moments when you got to get that paper written. But yeah, so just embrace the journey, because there's going to be hard days. There's going to be easy days. There will be a whole lot of fun along the way, and just to look for the good, because it will all end up coming together at the end.
I think that's a great reminder, and super relevant to anybody out there who's homeschooling their kids. So thank you for that. That's really, really good. And it just reminds, like, that's life, isn't it? Like you're like good things, beautiful things are there, but not at every minute of every day do we feel like that. So that's amazing. To me, that sounds like an amazing place to wrap up, because I mean, how do you get better than that? But Casey, thank you so much again for joining us. It's great to hear more about your story, and I know this is going to be a blessing to our audience. So thanks for being here.
I was so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know that our listeners are going to feel inspired. And if you're listening and you are inspired and encouraged, as I believe you will be, if you'd like to learn more about HSLDA Compassion, if you want to consider applying for one of those grants, just go to hslda.org/compassion. Or if you'd like to consider donating to help make this sort of thing possible. Maybe you're not homeschooling your kids, or maybe that was in the past or something like that. You can go to hslda.org/donate. This is made possible through our generous donor community. And if you're interested in becoming a member of HSLDA, please go to hslda.org/join. We'll have all the links available in the show notes below. So if you're watching or listening to this somewhere, just drop down to the show notes and we've got all this for you. And if you've enjoyed the episode, as always, please share it with your friends, and be sure to like or follow our channel on your platform of choice, wherever that is. Casey, thanks again so much. It's great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Have a great day.
Today's episode is made possible by HSLDA's Compassion Grants program. Whether it's a low-income family trying to make ends meet, or a family suffering after a natural disaster, some families simply wouldn't have the resources to homeschool without the help of fellow homeschoolers like you. Our Compassion Grants exist to make this support possible. To learn more about how you can help make homeschooling possible for struggling families, or to request assistance if you are homeschooling through hard times, visit hslda.org/compassion. That's hslda.org/compassion. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.